Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Miss Texas Show with your co-host, Melissa Santana. Excited as always to bring you another edition of the show, but also another wonderful guest. And today's guest is none other than Dr. Davenport King, who is not only a person that has over 20 years of experience serving the community, but is an advocate, speaker, mentor, life coach, philanthropist, among so many other wonderful things. And so we are going to get the opportunity to learn from Dr. Davenport King today. I'm excited to learn about their journey, all the great things they have been through, and all the wonderful ways that they have impacted others. And so I look forward to hearing from them. And I hope you are too, because it should definitely be a treat.
The Ms. Texas Show is a voice of hope for victims, survivors, advocates, and community leaders against gender-based violence to share their stories and resources. We began showcasing life in Texas. Today, we are impacting lives not only in Texas, but also around the world. Under our segment Military Time, we run this segment in partnership with the National Veterans Chamber of Commerce. We invite military and veterans who have overcome traumatic events to share their experiences during and after their military service. Under our beauty segment, we invite fellow pageant winners and contestants, artists, musicians, actors, models, and dancers, and last but not least, our survivor leaders from family violence, sex trafficking, sexual assault, stalking, and other traumatic events, who are ambassadors for these causes to share their lives and the impact they have made. To become a guest on our show, email us at msusatexas@gmail.com. If you would like to support victims and survivors of gender-based violence, make a tax-deductible donation to Hope Picks Global at www.hopepyxglobal.org.
Hello, everyone. Welcome once again to the Miss Texas Show with your co-host, Melissa Santana, along with our wonderful guest. So I get to introduce to you all none other than Dr. Ketra Davenport King. Dr. Ketra is charismatic, energetic, and captivating. These are only just a few words that describe her amazing personality. She is armed with over 20 years of serving the community. Dr. Davenport King is an advocate, speaker, mentor, life coach, and philanthropist who has radically impacted the lives of believers under the flagship of her ministry. She is also a native of Dallas, Texas, received her Bachelor of Arts in Science in Christian Counseling, Master of Arts in Christian Education, and Master of Business Administration from Dallas Baptist University. She earned her doctorate of strategic leadership from Regent University. She has spent much of her life serving people in various capacities, but one of her greatest joys is starting Life After Advocacy Group Incorporated in 2004, where she was able to help individuals who have been victims of sexual abuse recover and live a healthy life. So with that such rich and vast amount of experience, we appreciate you, Dr. Ketra, so much for taking the time today to be with us, to share with us a little bit about you. And so I would love if you could just tell viewers just a little bit more about who you are, a little bit about your journey, what led you here today.
Well, good. Thank you so much, Melissa, for inviting me. And I look forward to, sharing with you over these next few minutes. But a little bit about me. As I stated, my name is Dr. Ketra. That's my flag name. And I have spent much of my life helping individuals in various capacities through awareness and prevention for sexual assault and sexual abuse by virtue of my own life experiences. As a childhood victim of sexual abuse, it became my goal when I was about 30 years old, in a snapshot, to be able to walk in front of the voiceless to help them become who they are. Because a lot of times when we are victims, we begin to shut down. So we just shut down. We don't want to become. So that's what Life After Advocacy Group, and that was my heartbeat. I opened the doors in 2004. I'm a mother, I'm a wife, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a first lady. I'm a newly grandmother. Woohoo. So that's a new title for me. But other than that, that's me. I'm pretty open. I love these conversations. So just to start, that's just a little bit about me on the surface. And I look forward to sharing more and learning more about you and I as we go through this next moments together.
Absolutely. And I appreciate that so very much. It's such a wonderful, summary of all the wonderful things. But like you said, getting to know more about you and, who you are. I'm curious, what was life like for you before all the wonderful accolades that you received, life growing up, how you got all your great values? Because clearly it's evident that you care about others. It's evident that you like to, breathe life into others and help them, empower them. But I'm curious, what was life like for you before all of that even started?
Thank you. That I can appreciate that question because oftentimes we're not asked about us. It's always about what we do for others. But anyway, for me, I was a pretty quiet and sheltered child. I was raised in a two-parent home. My parents got married rather young. My mother had me rather young. She was 15 and my dad was 18 and they married, again, rather young. So I was the only child for a long time. And in that, as only child syndrome, you tend to be quiet, but a lot of my silence came from, if I would say, being a victim of childhood sexual abuse, particularly by my father. So that was a catalyst to a lot of my life decisions. Going through high school, I never was big on participating in things because I was always very reclusive and I never really took the initiative. I remember as high school, I wanted to be a cheerleader. I never would do that because I was too shy. I didn't want to be in front of everybody. So life for me, in the beginning of my life, I could say that was very, very, quiet in regards introvertly as a person. But, I was in a two-parent home. My parents provided, they did all the things that you see in, as a two-parent home. But as an individual, as a person who was going through abuse at the time, who didn't understand that dysfunction was not function. And I was being abused and not understanding that in its totality. So that kind of sheltered my life inwardly as well as outwardly.
Absolutely. And what I appreciate about what you said, but also, first of all, that gem of, the dysfunction, not being function, not functioning. And so not being well, but I feel like we don't, as you mentioned, don't always know that. I mean, that's the point. We're like, especially as children, we don't have that language. We don't have that experience or that exposure. So for us, I mean, it's probably normal. Like, this is just how it is. I mean, this is just what I see every day. Exactly. And I think what's so ironic, like you said, is that, you didn't come from a broken household in so many terms, you know what I mean? So like on paper, it wasn't broken because you have your mom and you have your dad and it's two of them and they're together and they're married. So like some of them like play house forever, but they were actually in an entire relationship like that they committed to and all of that. So I think, what's incredible is that because of that, and because on paper you look great, nobody would suspect anything either. I mean, they would probably think like, or if you were, and what's interesting is you internalized it and were more quiet. But for others, even if you would have been acting out, I think they still would have been like, well, it must be something else because I mean, she has the two parents and, it couldn't possibly be any other thing. So, maybe it's some other reason or maybe some influences. So it's just interesting how we can miss things that are like right in front of our face.
Right. Oftentimes, Melissa, that is what we do. Because we have a picture image. We want to see things like it has to be bad, it has to be ugly, it has to look a certain way. He got to look like, the devil almost to make people believe, surely this person could not do this because this person is upstanding in the community. They lead in the community. They have a 2.56 kids, including the dog. And everything can be great, but we do. That's very valid what you say. We miss the signs, we miss the signals. And a lot of times we don't want to bother the quiet kid, but the quiet kid is speaking volume because of their quietness. Their silence is volume.
Exactly. I agree. And I just think too, the only thing that's also disappointing about hearing that, you were more, and actually I was definitely a quiet kid also. So I definitely can relate to that. But it's also the fact that you were already not having anybody to be able to talk to, being the only child. And so then, and you're seen as the quiet kid that doesn't need to be bothered. So then unfortunately, you're not having other people to talk to in settings where you should be having the conversation. So in essence, that silence only grew, I feel. And so unfortunately, it's just amazing how we allow that to then happen, thinking it's okay, because I mean, we're not hearing any problem, we're not seeing anything, so I must be all right. And so we're not talking, we're not having the conversation, and that, only grows.
And it's ironic because it wasn't until I got into my latter teens, post-graduation, when I began to act out. And I write about this more specifically in my book, Seeing Beyond the Shattered Glass, because in that I began to act out in my adulthood. I felt like the chains were released. I wasn't in a presence. And so I had to kind of navigate through this life. What I feel that I didn't really have the guidance. I had great parents, I guess, if you want to say, on paper. My mom, she has always been there. My mom is great in who she is in her own accord, but she was also a teenage mother. So we can't take that away. Like, she was a teenage mother. So you love your child, but you really don't understand parenting because you're still developing. So there's difference. And so it's almost like we had to grow together. So I missed a lot of things of the unknown that I didn't even know how to ask. Right. And she didn't know how to tell because she also was young. So it was in my early, late teens, early 20s that I feel like my life began to just spiral out of control. I call it the dark tunnel. And I began to just, experiment, do things that were just beyond me, which was my cry. Right. You get it? Like, we all have a cry. Absolutely. And it's that silent cry. And mine began to cultivate in various areas of my life, broken relationships, things that I shouldn't have done, getting in trouble when I should have not gotten in trouble. But that's when my life would just begin to spiral. And like I said, I write about that in Seeing Beyond the Shattered Glass.
Absolutely. And I'm glad, because I definitely want to definitely touch on that as well. And, that in the fact that you were able to, put that into this wonderful story that can then help others. But I also think you once again touched on something that is absolutely incredible, is that, and that's why it can be so damaging to let that silence only grow, and for it not to be able to be explored in a healthy and safe way, because unfortunately it does catch up to you. And so I think what's interesting is that with you unfortunately did not escape it. And so it just found its way to you then. And that was your opportunity then to finally have the release, which unfortunately you were never afforded before then. And so, and like you said, for many reasons, not only because of, being the quiet kid, not only because you didn't even have siblings, unfortunately, to be able to even, vent off of, but you also had a mom who was doing the best she could with what she had and with what she knew at the time. Because literally, as you mentioned, literally growing up, literally trying to figure it out, and let's add mom onto it. And now you have this other child to take care of. Definitely no small feat for anyone, but let alone someone who is also young and still trying to figure it out. But I think that is incredible that with you, it did catch up to you then. And, and like you said, we all have our dark ages. So like, we can definitely call them that. And I'm glad you do touch base on that. But what I'm curious about is, knowing that you did go through that stage, I'm curious, what was the biggest lesson you got from it, but also just how you were able to get out of it? Because now I'm hearing that, you had this point, you also had this stage where it caught up with you and all that, but like, how are you able to then come out on the other side?
Right. That is good. And it's interesting because I don't want to sound, obviously I was raised by a Christian home.
Absolutely.
In its own dysfunction, I guess, so there was a foundation of understanding a relationship with Christ. So I have to use that, because that may not be, that was truly my catalyst. That was truly my navigating out of this. I didn't know a lot of things about how to, rise above it, but I was planted around people who I could confide in, right? So I was able to talk about what happened. That's why I would say, you gotta be able to speak out about what has happened to you. So I was able to have a conversation. I was able to talk about what happened to me. And as I began to talk about what happened to me, I can't tell you that my life got great, but I can tell you in my early 20s, when I was 20, 23, 22, I was 22 when I spoke out to a trusted friend. Then in turn, in 23, when I got pregnant with my son, I told my mom, my life just began to just kind of open up, right? Because it has been so closed. That kind of allowed me to connect with who I was in Christ. Because I had to go through a journey. It was a journey for me. I had to from 20 to 20, from my 20s to my 30s, I had to discover, what is it? Who am I? What am I to do? I'm considered a late bloomer. I'm Dr. Ketra today, but I didn't start back to school until I was 30. When I graduated from high school, I just spiraled out of control. Like I said, mine was a delayed response. And so I started college, I dropped out of college. I didn't go back to school. When I went back to school, I had been through a failed marriage. I had one son out of marriage. I had a daughter that was 5 months, and I was turning 30 years old. So I spent the next age from 30 to 40 in school with 2 small children by myself to overcome. But I kind of redirected a lot of energy, but I also sought out counseling and went through a rehabilitation period. So those were things that, and I can go on about that, but those were some of the things that helped me to navigate it. And one of the things that I've been doing this for so long, being an advocate, I often say that a lot of people, they will redirect their energy, because that's what I did. You redirect your hurt. So in my case, I put it towards school, because people ask, how did you go to school with 2 small children and taking master level classes and such? It's because I had redirected all the hate, the hurt, and that pain. And that was my working mechanism. That's how I worked through it. So I think that we have to discover what works for us. And so for me, that was it. I can't tell you there was a lot of tearful nights. Yes, it was. There were a lot of hurt. There was a lot of anger. I remember when I discovered I was angry. And I had to work through that, because we suppress our emotions, we suppress our feelings, because we always got to act like everything is okay. And we can't really say it's not okay. And when we begin to rehabilitate is when we begin to really fine tune and navigate through those seasons in our life, the anger, the hurt, the pain, the reconciliation, the forgiveness, and things of that nature.
Absolutely. And I think what's also fascinating is that in the midst of that, you had some relationship, like you said, some of which, were not healthy and all of those things. But that's another reason why we need to do this, not only, because for the benefit of any future relationship we're going to have with anyone, but also the most important one, the relationship with ourselves. And so I just think, it's incredible that you I'm glad definitely to hear along the way that you absolutely had outlets. So, I'm definitely glad that, you may not have had it growing up. Unfortunately, they might have missed it at school, but, at least in that school, because eventually school became your safe haven. Yes. But growing up, they might have missed it there. But I'm glad that 22, 62, you know what I mean? That either way, it's never too late to finally get that and to be able to finally get that release regardless. Exactly. And so even though, it might have been a little bit late by other people's standards, there are some people that I know that still have not shared their story with others, and have either not found somebody that they can trust like yourself, or just really haven't processed it, to be honest. And so I'm glad that, and what's also fascinating is that you said in your 20s though was also your dark moment. So this is where you're spiraling. This is also where you spoke out. So it's just like incredible that both of these things are happening at once. So you're literally like doing that, like to act out, but then you're also speaking out. And so I just think, it was like incredible that you were like, and you know what, that's why I think it's interesting that sometimes that's another thing that I think we judge. We talked about missing things, but I also think we prejudge things. And I think it's always interesting that the kids who do act out, we tend to think like, oh, well, it must be, we're not going to deal with that kid. They must be something wrong with them. And, they're not worth the time or the intervention. And little do we know that it may be something like hurting them on the inside. And that's actually why they needed more than anyone else. And interestingly for you, around the same time that you spoke up, you were also like finally finding your voice. Maybe it was, not the best way at first, but you didn't know. You were just trying to figure it out, and you were finally like facing your world for the first time. So it is wonderful that somebody was able to help you make sense of that. But like I said, for any of those who may be feeling like, they still haven't found that person, as you're hearing from both of us, it's definitely never too late. Because it is always worth it, right, to explore that and to be able to, get that closure if you haven't gotten it before.
And that is so true, because there's not a time frame or a time limit where you can not speak out. And unfortunately, society kind of puts that stigma on individuals and women who decides to speak out later in life. And it's always that infamous question is, why now? Well, I think it says, why not? Because there's not a time frame, a time limit on how and when we can speak out about what has happened to us. Is when we get to that place where we can discover within us,
Right.
within us, that it's time to speak out, because now I want to become free. And I feel like a part of my rehabilitation process was I had to go through various steps, and I make it very simple. Even when I write, you have to identify what happened to you. You have to identify that it happened. And once you identify, you move to the next stage, and there's sequences of things that happen in each stage. You move to the next stage, you identify, then you have to admit it happened. You got to say, this is what happened to me. He touched me, she touched me. He did this to me, he did that to me, she did this to me. You have to admit those things that happened. And then finally, you have to accept it. Because in your acceptance, you're able to become free. In your acceptance, you're able to move, flowing through life, that like, okay, that don't define me. I'm sorry about that. That does not define me. He just walked right in the camera. Okay, that doesn't define me, but it also helps me to be who I am today. Because without that, I wouldn't even have as much tenacity, as much energy as I have. And I'm not saying I wanted that to happen, but it has defined and made me who I am today.
Absolutely. And I definitely think that that's, like you said, such a necessary and vital part of the process is to be able to do that. And I really, really, really appreciate that you said, because that's another thing that we touch on today is definitely language, and how, especially as a kid, you do not have that language, and you don't, like we mentioned, we don't have that exposure. But once you are able to, get that opportunity, it is powerful in part of the acceptance, like you said, to not this isn't your chance to tiptoe. Now that you're, if you really are going to face it head on. And you don't need to, you're doing yourself a disservice to try to like minimize it or try to like make excuses for it. You do not have to do that. And that's the other thing, that of course we would be remiss to have this show, and as always, let it be known how much we do take a stand against interpersonal violence. It shouldn't be happening. Definitely nobody that's ever had it happen to them deserves it.
Right.
In your case especially. But if it did happen, we absolutely want you to get that healing in the most authentic and best way and complete way. And so we definitely would not want you to not, face that, and of course with the right support, which I'm glad that, as you mentioned, you had, and all of that. And we know that sometimes there have been people who have opened up and it didn't go that well, so we understand that. And I know that for you, what's interesting is that you might not have been felt, that you could do that before you did, open up at 22. You're right, which is why the waiting occurred, but like rightfully so, because I mean, it also could be more damaging to then open up if somebody makes you feel worse for it. So, when you shouldn't. I mean, and some of them, are well-intentioned, and they try, they didn't mean to do that, but that can absolutely happen. And so because of that, I'm actually curious about like the other piece that you mentioned. The other catalyst was your faith. And so that was a big part. It was something big for you. I'm curious though, since it was a big part of your upbringing, it's certainly a big part of your life now, but was it ever tested given everything you've been through? Like, were there times where it wasn't as strong and like all of that, and you had to also work on that relationship, that you had with God, and also just as a Christian, or just, just curious about that piece?
That is a good piece. That's a good question, Melissa, because you're right. It was always tested. I feel like every moment, everything that I did was all a test, because it's part of my testimony, right? So I feel like that my whole life was a test. I'm still being tested today. I know I chuckle because I feel like every day we have to call on the Father and be like, okay, Lord, help me today. But I can think about various moments. I remember when I got pregnant with my son. He at 23, that was kind of actually my segue into speaking out, because I felt like I did not want to be the same type of person that my father was. So I know that may sound crazy, but I was like, that was dysfunctional. I don't want to be dysfunctional. How do I not be that? How do I not hurt my children the same way? So I feel like my faith was tested in that time, because when you come up against your parents and you come up against things that has happened to you, you got to find your own identity and identifying who you are. What kind of strength you have that you can rise up out of this and be okay with your feet planted solid on a ground that this is what happened, and I'm not being untruthful. This is what happened to me. So I feel like that first test was with outside of many tests, but that test with my son, because I just did not want to be that. And I really have to seek God in a different level, seek God in a different place. And when I began to just move through and navigate through life, in my 30s, when I went back to school, as I mentioned, that Jeremiah 29:11 became my refuge. That became a scripture that is inscripted everywhere. You just see it, like, because I feel like that God spoke to me with that. He said he knew the plans that he had for me, not to harm me. He knew what was going on. He knew me in my mother's womb. He knew this was going to happen, but that don't mean he didn't love me, right? That didn't mean he just threw me away.
Absolutely.
That means that he tested me because he knew me. And he knew that even in that, my love would still rise above that happened, that I would still stand and be faithful. I would still serve, and I would still praise him, and I would still love him. So that, to me, has been my journey. And that is what still sustains me today.
Absolutely. And it's just, amazing. And then also that, like you said, the fact that your son also like kind of propelled you into like speaking out, I think it's incredible with the kids, what the kids can do. Because that's definitely a part of my story as well, is that, for some, they're like, oh man, like, or for some that haven't had kids that think like, oh, it could be so stressful and it's so scary. Sometimes kids save your life. I mean, honestly. And
They
so
do.
like,
They
they're
do.
right. They can be amazing. And so like, yes, of course it is a lot of work. I mean, I would never minimize motherhood whatsoever, but it can also be like incredibly humbling and incredibly
Yes.
rewarding, for like so many reasons. So like hearing that also, just that combination of how, yes, your faith was tested, but it's clearly like has been your stronghold throughout. But then also that in the midst of all of these things that were happening, you did have a child, and that child actually helped you, also in the midst of all of these great things, and like led you to some of the great healing that you said as well. So it is amazing. And I am curious about that. So then like, as a mother, in the midst of all of these things, like what has been your biggest, like takeaway with, like, what did you learn about like balancing being a mother also with schooling? Like, what would you say is one of the biggest takeaways you would say with motherhood? Although
Oh
that
my
might be hard to
God.
summarize.
Oh God, just balance. I had got so, I became linear, I call it linear focused. And that can be good and bad. That can be a good and bad thing, okay? Because it was good because it allowed me to accomplish some goals with children that I probably couldn't have done if I was all over the place. But the bad thing is I alienated myself, and I wasn't able to have sustainable relationships because I was so strategically focused on what I do. So my takeaway is that I had to understand the balance that life doesn't have to be so rigid. It doesn't have to be so, this way to accomplish this goal. And also, learning to laugh some. You gotta laugh at yourself. You gotta have fun. I believe God has a sense of humor. Jesus has a sense of humor, and we can love each other. We can love people. We don't have to hate people. And just because people hurt us, we don't have to walk around in our life hating them. We have to be released and free. So I think that those are some of the things that I took away from me, just to how I got to be me today. I listen intuitively, but I also learned to just release it intentionally. So there's some things differently about me and how I am at this age now.
Oh, absolutely. But then I think that's, amazing that and so that's why, in the midst of all of those lessons and, growing and developing and just, which is something that we always do throughout our lives. And, obviously motherhood doesn't, only helps with that, only aids in that process. Because, it humbles you and it teaches you quite a lot. And you're constantly, shown different lessons, from different perspectives. And of course, your children would also tell you, when they, as they have opinions and, they keep you on that path. I'm also curious. So like knowing, and I know that speaking of balance, well, you definitely I can see why you definitely learned that, because as you mentioned, you were in school and you found school, even though you found it, in your 30s, you definitely ended up going out to have a rich education, and you were balancing that while being, mom of, like you said, some young children. Did you always know that you wanted to go into the, because I believe it was Christian counseling and, all that, in that route? Like, did you know you wanted to combine your faith with school? Did you figure that out along the way? Curious how you arrived there.
That's good. No, I did not. That was not the intention. Okay. Like I was just going to school like everybody else. Like
Right.
I just wanted to go to school, but it wasn't until I began my liberating walk, when I became free and I understood the importance of integrating faith in every part of my life, is that what I wanted to go to a faith-based school, Christian foundation, discipline school. So that is what led me to choosing Dallas Baptist University, is because I was able to integrate every aspect of my life in my educational career. So that wasn't something I thought about all the time, but it's definitely developed and formed me into who I am, because that I feel like Christ is the conduit to everything we do and who we are. And that is my faith. That is not, I don't know. I don't want to sound, because anybody can listen to this talk show today, wherever they are in whatever their belief system is. I'm saying to you what my belief system is and what I believe and what has been my catalyst and what I believe solely in the word of God. And that has been my approach to how I have overcome such adverse situations in my life.
Absolutely. And I agree. And I appreciate you actually, bringing that up, because agreed, we're definitely, don't want it to turn into a soapbox, make you feel like we are trying to convert anyone or change anyone's path, but it's definitely, but I love that, as you mentioned, but that is what worked for you. And it's always, there's so much value in finding out what works for you, and what works for you is not going to work for someone else. I mean, there's a reason we were all made differently. We were all, we all have different, upbringings and different personalities. So there is no one size fits all when it comes to these things. And even for those who do share the same faiths, there's not every Christian is the same either. You know what I mean? So like everybody choose to follow that path, in their own way, in the way that, does work for them. But it is interesting to hear that even for yourself, someone who has all these great degrees and all this, like I said, accolades that they, have earned, didn't necessarily have that plan right away. You know what I mean? So you were able to like let life, guide you in that way. And also, of course, God, especially too, since, as you mentioned, is the guide for you. But it's just interesting that you were able to do, arrive there, later on. And so now that you have, I mean, did you always know what your goal was as far as how you wanted to impact others? And what are some of the great ways, that you have been able to now impact others as well?
Yeah, no, I didn't. Because I was like I said, I was a shy person. I was the one who sat in the back of the room and would look for the seat in the back. And God had to really deal with me in that capacity when he called me. I was called to the ministry in 2005. So I had to go through that purging process of like, Lord, are you, I know you sure, but I need to be sure. Am I sure? Because I'm not used to being in front of people like that. So I knew it had to be the power, but what I can appreciate when we ask God to help us is the whole, he took me to Timothy. Timothy was one who was young, and he may not been as equipped as other people, but he was called. And so I had to learn that no matter at what capacity, God can use any of us, and he can use me, even in my brokenness, even in my flaws, the things that I've done, he can use me to help other people. So I knew that as I began that journey in 2005, that it would lead to that I would be in a place where I can help other people. Now I'm all about the grassroots, getting to the nitty gritty. I'm about the community, serving the community, helping individuals that are underprivileged. That is my niche. That is my heartbeat. But I also want to inspire and encourage other individuals. And that takes me to like the speaking, and take me to moments like this, or in my writings. I definitely want to be able to tell the story to where somebody in their quiet space could say, that was me. I want to do whatever it is that she did, or whatever helped her to get to where she is now. Because I don't feel like God did anything great for me that he wouldn't do for anyone else. I want to share the story. I remember when I was as I stated, I started school when I was 30, going back to school when I was 30. And I was going to the community college here locally in Dallas. And I was walking, dropped my kids off. It was late. I was working full time. I was taking night classes. I dropped my daughter and my son at my mom's house. And then I was taking night classes, started like 9 o'clock at night. So because I had to make sure my time had to make sense, because that's what I needed. My mom was a very, again, supportive of that. Then I was walking through the the foyer part of the school. And I heard this very light voice, you know, to me, my spirit saying, the struggle has no hold on the outcome. And that is my subtitle. That's my mantra. That's, you know, that's under Life After Advocacy Group, because God gave that to me. And I remember when I got to my class, I was like, did I read that somewhere? You know, I was sitting there asking myself, did I read that somewhere? Did somebody tell me that? Or is it just like, where did that come from? But that became a staple, that the struggle has no hold on the outcome. Like, no matter all the struggles I've been through, everything that I'm going through, it does not hold the outcome to what God has already planned for me and what he has already planned for you, what he has already set in motion. According to Jeremiah 1:5, he said he knew us in our mother's womb before we were even created, before mama met daddy. He knew who we were. So I feel that those things have been very instrumental into becoming, you know, me and my faith and my walk.
Absolutely. But then interestingly, I think you said, so you felt called, 2005, but you started Life After Advocacy Group in 2004, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So, okay. So did you like just, kind of start that, or just on faith and just felt like, and just knew that it would be part of it, or like, did it get integrated later on, or like what inspired you to start that before you, officially like felt that?
Well, I was already in church. So I was very involved in my ministry. I made my public declaration in 2005. So I was participating in my church. I was, a devout Christian, going to service and everything. And I was also seeking God too. Right. Like even with seeking the organization, Life After Advocacy Group, understanding what he wanted me to do with that. I call it my business Bible, that I have a binder where I wrote down all kind of names, because God was giving me all these names, but I didn't know what it meant and what it was and how I came up with Life After Advocacy Group. But it's funny because that was from like 2004. So, but I was already in church, so I didn't have to get in church, but I made a public declaration. I announced it to my pastor, my then pastor, that, I feel that God has called me, and that who I was is and based on my works and my walk. So it officially started in 2004. I did the paperwork and all of that to establish the 501c3 organization. And then I made a public declaration again, I say, to my pastor in 2005.
Wow. And then I think what is, incredibly inspiring about that is, so that's the thing. Like, so even while we're on our walk, and even when we might not be completely sure or think, we're always going to like question ourselves. We're human beings. We know that we're flawed. We know that we are not perfect. But if you're, when you're called to do something and the work is there to be done, you should do it. There's a reason for you to be getting that feeling and doing all of that. You don't have to be in this perfect place or like a certain time. So I think that's why I actually wanted to bring that up. And so like, I'm glad you, entertained me for that, is that, that's the point. So like, you were able to make that public declaration, not meaning that you hadn't already been following, of course, like, you knew where you were, but at the same time, for you to have like started that, and then to make it, have it intertwined with where you were and what you then said out loud to everyone else later on, is just, wonderful to me. But I think also just something that I hope viewers understand also. That's why we're saying, there is no perfect time for these things. And like I said, there is no perfect recipe. When you want to start it, you should just start it. You shouldn't be afraid to do that. But also, like, we all do have those callings, and those are also unique to each one of us. And unique to, whatever our strengths might be and all of that. And I just love that, as a result, you're definitely walking in your purpose and found a way to be able to do that. And let's not forget, you're the quiet kid, like you said, the shy, introverted one has like multiple master's degrees, has a doctorate, but then also founded this wonderful organization. So now turn that around and be able to help others. So I think I definitely hope others hear the inspiration that I'm hearing behind that, and how, you were able to do that along each, step.
Thank you so much. Yes. And it hasn't always been easy. Oftentimes we see the finished work, right, but we don't always see the quiet struggle. And so it hasn't always been easy, but what I am grateful is that I didn't stop. I didn't stop. I didn't say no. Once I said yes, I meant yes. Once I said yes to the Lord, I said yes, and I kept going. And that yes was the catalyst to overcome the lights being cut off, overcome when I didn't have any money, overcoming getting laid off my job, overcoming, almost getting kicked out of grad school because I had a professor who didn't think I was supposed to be there. The yes didn't mean that I wasn't going to go through the fire. It just means that I was determined to overcome all that God knew what God had called me to be and who he had called me to become, so that I could be able to be a beacon of hope, hopefully, and a voice for the voiceless.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, and speaking of that, I definitely think another great way that another wonderful contribution is absolutely the book that, you wrote. And I'm not sure where in the journey you were able to fit that in. But I think it's incredible that you wrote it. I'm curious, when did that come about? How did you get inspired for that also? Was it in conjunction with what you were doing? Was it separate? Just curious when it came about.
Yeah, that's good. So part of Life After Advocacy Group is obviously awareness and prevention. Right. And so I've been doing this since 2004. I've in the community, pounding the pavement, speaking, bringing light to such a dark situation. And God just dealt with me. Now, he gave me my story 15 years ago, but I started a manuscript and never finished it. And now I say 15, so it's probably more like 18 years ago now, but 18 years ago. And so I started, didn't ever finish, didn't ever pick it up, didn't really know how, because you got to remember, when you're writing about what happened to you, that's a cathartic moment. You gotta relive it again because you're putting it in a writing context. So I had to, I will pick it up and start. And so during COVID, actually, during COVID, I said, okay, I think I'm going to go ahead and finish this. And God's timing is perfect timing. And I believe God did a lot of things for us if we were just listening during the COVID era. But it was doing that. I had obtained a great writing coach. He was very, very, very instrumental in that support that I needed to get this book out, Seeing Beyond the Shattered Glass. Although as I stated, I wrote it in with fictional characters, but the story is me. The story is real. But I wanted to be able to connect with so many people, no matter who you are, man, woman, child, what age you are, whatever your, gender preferences are, although, but I wrote it in, it rolled out in 2020, and it won an award in 2021. It became a award-winning book. And so that's how Seeing Beyond the Shattered Glass came about.
Wow. And I just think, many things there that, I think are amazing about that, but also just, one of the things was definitely how interesting what you mentioning about the pandemic. And so I think it's interesting that, we definitely could say a lot about that era.
Yes.
Technically we're still in it,
still there.
Out of it. We don't, but it's so interesting to be alive now in the midst of this. So, definitely interesting times, but I definitely think, interestingly, like you said, it did force people to slow down. That's one thing that I think we can all share. At some point, we were forced to literally be in our houses. We were not supposed to leave. Like, there were times when the streets were deserted. So, and before that, I also vividly remember being so like boom, boom, boom. It was always one thing after the other. I was like flying through things and like just really fast pace. And it forced you to like not do anything. Like, even if you had anything going on, you literally couldn't. So you either had to pivot during that time, you either had to find a new thing to do, or maybe, finally pick up something that maybe you hadn't explored, like you said in your case, in a while. And so I just think it gave a lot of people that perfect opportunity, and obviously no less, in your case, but how incredible for you to then go back to something that, like you said, was always there, but allowed you that opportunity and space to really sit with it, process it, but then also be able to then, bring it out into the story that was meant, to be shared, because it was definitely meant to be shared, but like you said, at the right timing. And I think what was also wonderful to hear was you weren't also afraid to have assistance with it. The story was yours, to be shared, but I actually heard writing coach, and I don't always hear that. So I'm I don't know if you already knew that writing coaches existed. I don't know if somebody wonderful like put that in your ear, but I think it's awesome that, like, for those who may be thinking, well, yeah, but I don't feel like I can do it on my own, or maybe I might need help. Like, that's awesome to hear that there are people like writing coaches that helped you and that could certainly help others. I'm curious, like, who helped you,
Yeah, well, what I did is I did some research, and I had other friends that had authored books. They were authors. And so for me, because I am I'm very strategic. So, and I don't want to say perfectionist, but I wanted to be I'm a palatable writer. So I didn't want anything vulgarity. I didn't want it to be a bashing. I wanted a message. And how do you formulate a message? I believe that everyone has to seek wise counsel for anything you do. So I spoke to a couple people, and then I ended up with my writing coach, and with his wisdom and his years of experience, he was able to help me formulate my thoughts. He was able to help me say, well, this is what I would say. This is how I want to put it. And how do you put that in context? Because what I did not want to happen was Seeing Beyond the Shattered Glass based on the nature and the context of the book. I did not want you to read it and then put it down before you can complete it. Because that has happened to a lot of subject matters in this particular context. I wanted you to go through the story to receive the message, so that there can be some hope on the other side of where you are. So, the only way I can do that was to say, how do I translate my mess that happened to me into a message that will be conducive and a conduit for those who are hurt? So that is how I experienced, and that was my quest of research to get a writing coach.
Oh, and then I just think, and what's so wonderful about that is that, you know, the fact that you had that foresight, you know, to even know like that you needed that, you know, that you could benefit from that, and what it would do for your audience. And so that you wanted to have a message that was, like you said, translated in a way that, you know, could be heard, could be understood, but also received. So that's what I heard, you know, and so like, that's the main thing, because the message was already there, like you mentioned. I mean, it was definitely worth sharing, absolutely, and it was definitely yours to absolutely share with the world regardless. But for you to also take that time, that, you know, and then put that care and precision into it to make sure that it had that, I just think that's, you know, wonderful. And it's a resource that honestly I didn't know was always there. And I mean, whenever we learn about those, I mean, we should use them. I mean, because that's what we've been mentioning. I mean, you're hearing from somebody who has a master's in Christian counseling who did not mind going to therapy herself, you know, so like, we're going to promote these resources because we have in mind using them ourselves. And so like, and I'm also a big fan of counseling also. So like, I agree, but that's why, because there's value in it, and being able to help it and then craft what is something that is so valuable and can help others, but doing that in that strategic way, like you mentioned. So I super appreciate that. With that, I'm curious, do you have any other books in store? I mean, do you think there's any other stories that might be shared in the future? You don't have to spoil it for us, but spoil any news, but just curious.
Yeah, so one is I just want to make this statement too about Seeing Beyond the Shattered Glass, because just so you know that the setting of this book is in a counseling office.
Oh, look at that.
So that was the point, based on what you just said. I wanted our community, us particularly as a people, this book is for everyone. This is not specifically for one culture of people. However, but I wanted us to understand that it is okay to get counseling. We hear that, we say that, especially with mental health being on the rise, but we have to understand, what does that look like? How does that help me? So my hope when I, again, put the setting in a counseling office with Cassidy was that you could see the beginning stage and the end stage of where she was and how she became who she is today. So that is the hope. So in regards to your question, yes, my second book released in 2021, Revelation. Oh, I love that book. Oh my God, that's my, I tell you, but I just had an interview the other day about Revelation, because it's always about awareness and prevention to sexual assault, abuse, and how to overcome. I always have a message. It's always about the instant the thing that happened and how you can get to forgiveness. That's always gonna be my message in any book you read that I write. But Revelation released in 21. And it's about the church dealing with understanding how people in the pews are hurting and how this particular issue has affected many people. So check that out. Revelation is a novel. And I will begin writing the next book to that this year, latter part of this year. And I hope to see you get it. But Revelation is like, I was able to be very creative with that book. So I feel like, oh, you know, and it's funny because I feel like I was a lot freer because I wasn't really telling my story. I have been in front of many people for many years that have shared their story. And I always say, how can I help those who are so quiet and they don't share their story? Right. So what I feel like my writing is doing in awareness and prevention is to help individuals who are silent be able to connect with stories that are just like their stories.
Amen. Definitely.
That they can tell the story, that they can tell their story.
And then, but I also love too that you want to be able to definitely do that with those who are especially quiet, knowing what it was like to have been quiet in your own life, you know, so that's what always takes, you know, like the right person to know with that right experience to recognize, you know, like why that's also needed and why we don't want to miss that, you know, ever again, and like miss that opportunity that, you know, may have happened before. So that's amazing. And I'm glad because that's like recent, like in the pretty recent past that book came out, but also like new enough. So definitely like, you know, I'm glad that that's also there, but also that we heard there is going to be more with that you're also going to be able to make. So awesome. And so the only other question I wanted to ask also is that apart from the book writing and, you know, which we know is definitely happening, we know that, you know, you still have the group, I'm assuming, and all these other great things. I'm just curious, what are there any other events that you know might be happening or other things going on or that might be also taking place in the future apart from the book?
Yeah, I have I'm always doing awareness events. I have an event coming up I just met today actually in the Purple and Teal event in October of 2022. Just a few months away. Is because obviously Domestic Violence Month is October. Yeah. So we always like to connect with domestic violence because everything has a stem. And so we always tie that into sexual abuse. And we're hosting an event. I'm hosting Life After Advocacy Group is hosting an event in October. And then I have a few more pop-up spaces. I'm gonna be at an I Live event this Saturday here in Arlington, Texas. I'm gonna be at another event in October. Yeah, so just a lot of pop-ups, but and then I'll be at the Global PYX. the Hope PYX Global, yes, in October. Yes, so you know, a lot of things going on, but I just want to stay relevant and stay an activist. Again, my voice is for the voiceless, and I hope to be able to be a beacon of hope as I started off with that statement, because somebody needs somebody, and sometimes they just need to hear your story.
Absolutely. And I know you're already doing it in so many, you know, very fulfilling ways already with the speaking, with this, with that. Are there any other big lofty goals that you have, or do you feel like you're already, you know, where you'd like to be, you know, in the midst of giving those voices to the voiceless?
You know, I think like just where I am, you know, I just want to be my goal. Let me just say a goal. Just continue to spread the word of awareness and prevention. That's my goal. Be a great grandparent, you know, be a great wife, okay? Absolutely. But just being intentional about the message, continue to spread the message, continue to be a voice, you know, maybe do some movies one day, who knows?
Right, exactly. Definitely, you know, the limits are endless, you know, so when it comes to those, you know, wonderful things. And I don't know if that might have been who it was, but I think you did mention also be a good wife. Is that what I heard?
Yes.
So, I mean, just to, you know, shed light on the fact that there is hope on the other side as well. I know that there have been past relationships, but I'm assuming this one is a good one because you're still in it. So, so
it's
like,
funny.
I was gonna ask, how has that been going? Like, any advice you have for those, like, you know, who might not have found their one to be with? Just curious about that.
There's hope. Look here, there's hope in the midst of the storm. I was married for the first time when I was 28. I thought I was just gonna be it. I'm like, oh yeah, but I was, you know, so young, still so caught in myself, so tangible related. And so we were married 3 whole years. So it's like I left the husband and started school. Okay, so that's how that happened. And then so I met my now husband when I was 40. And so we've been married now 11 years, and we here. This is, you just seen him pass through. He did a cameo appearance. He didn't know I was recording. He was coming in. So he did a cameo recording. For all those who watch this video, my husband just did a cameo appearance, you know. So, but yes, so it's been 11 years and there is hope. You just got to work at anything you have, you got to work at. But it's good. You got to make a commitment. You got to first know that you got to commit to the thing that you're going to be in it. It's easy to leave and hard to stay, is what I always say.
Oh, yes. Not always something we think about, but that's another
Yeah.
gem.
Yes.
But I also love hearing that there is hope on the other side, because to what for some might be late, like you said, I'm gonna take your words, because to me, I think it sounds like it was right on time. I mean, you obviously, pursued your schooling at the right time for you. You obviously set an amazing example for your children, to see the value in a continued education and, being able to do that. And now you were able to also find love, at a great time, like when was good, and for you at a time when you could enjoy it, as well.
Yes.
So like for you to also be able to appreciate that, enjoy it, bask in it, and now be able to take on all these new experiences, including being a grandparent. So like, again, congrats on that again.
Yes.
But
New. I tell you, that's real new. And I'm a new mother-in-law. So my son got married. Okay. He's been married a couple months. And then, my granddaughter came a couple weeks ago. So this is my running joke. I turned 50 and then all of a sudden I got a daughter-in-law and I got a granddaughter. So I guess, hey, God's timing is perfect. So 50
absolutely.
is a golden year. Jubilee, year of Jubilee.
Right. No, but I agree that I'm like, wow, that is interesting, like to be able to have all of those things. And that's why we know our lives can, they obviously, as they continue to progress and as they continue, I mean, we can't call it, there's going to be so many changes that might happen, but it is great to put yourself in that great path to be able to then, enjoy them well and, and learn from these experiences well, but also like take from it what you can, like, and, be able to do that. But it is interesting to see you in these new and interesting chapters, but then also still being able to, provide that other work, in the meantime, like you mentioned, with the books and with the engagements and all of those things. But so you, and I was going to say, you definitely mentioned some exciting things to come that are, happening. And you definitely mentioned some great books that are around the way. So I would like to give you space now to tell us if others want to follow you, connect with you, learn from you, see you at any of those upcoming events and the books, where they can do all of those things and find those things.
Okay, so you can find all my books. Follow me, chat with me at drketra.com. www.drketra.com. And you can also visit the organization website off of my website. So they all connect. So you can check it out, Life After Advocacy Group. But you can follow me on all social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn at Dr. Ketra.
Oh, look at that.
Author Dr. Ketra. There you go. Just say Author Dr. Ketra, or type in Dr. Ketra and I shall come up.
Awesome. That, and then the website also, the fact that it's all collectively on there is awesome. So it's just one central space. Usually I do get a couple handles, I'm not gonna lie, like you can find me here and then there's this over here and then all of that. So love that it's all collective, it's all in one space. But as you all heard, there's no excuse then not to connect, and so you can definitely find Dr. Ketra in one way or another. But especially with the website, so I definitely heard that loud and clear. So
and also I'm sorry.
Oh no, go ahead.
And also, my books are on all platforms, Barnes and Nobles, Amazon, you can reach me, find me, Goodreads, all of them are out there. You can look me. But if you want an autographed copy, definitely drketra.com. It's autographed to you. So if you go to the website and order straight from the website, and let me hear from you. I love to chat. So there's a chat feature on the website that you can reach out to me, especially when you're done reading, but like, I need to ask the author. So you can come and chat with me. I love to chat.
And that's all I was gonna add, is that, like, so as you can hear too, that it's glad that you can go on the website and get all those things, but that yes, you can also then get whatever it is you're seeking, whether it is to get connected to the organization or the book. So I'm very glad you added that, because that's good to know. So like, outside of just that, any other platform that you already have for getting your books, you can also add these to the list, because they're definitely there. But I love to hear the added bonus of getting an autograph copy through the website. So y'all heard it, a little extra perk there to be able to get it through that way. But also to be able to connect with you. And so with that, it has been an honor and a pleasure. I don't know if there's anything else you want to share with viewers before we end our time officially.
No, I just want to thank you so much, Melissa, and the Miss Texas Show. This has been phenomenal. It has been a great time. It's fun. God's timing is perfect timing. We have tried this timing several times, but here we are. And this has been a fruitful, and I'm very grateful for your time that you would choose me to speak with me.
Oh, well, the
Okay.
feeling is entirely mutual. No, and
Yeah.
same, honestly, because it's definitely been nothing short of an honor and pleasure, but definitely. I also gained a lot from it. Viewers, I hope you did too, but I really definitely, truly appreciate that. And encourage all others too, because I love that, in the midst of all these great things you do, you're so personable and still like encourage that connection, that personal connection with the chat feature, because like y'all heard today, I mean, it felt like a great, wonderful conversation that we had. So obviously, if that resonated with you and you want to have that also, I just love that you provide that opportunity. So
Yes, thank
I
you.
hope, others take advantage of it. So
Yes,
with
I'd
that,
love to hear from you.
yes. And with that, I thank you so very much. And thank everyone else for tuning in. And, I appreciate it. Until the next time.
Thank you.